Hi guys, and welcome back to the cast in order of appearance. I'm pretty excited about this episode because today we are going to be going over one of my favourite characters in the whole of the 40k universe, both aesthetically and also narratively, the Death Jester. So let's get started with the lore. So Death Jesters play the part of death within the mask, and they are like these very grim practical jokers taking amusement from what they do on the battlefield. They always try and find like some, twisted, ironic way in which they can kind of dismember their own foes. So they've got these shrieker cannons which cause like their victims to explode from the inside and cartilage to spray everywhere and all sorts of grisly, nasty things, which I think really characterizes the universe in terms of it being the grim dark. So Death Jesters always try and find something like a commander to kill in the middle of his speech, or a way of turning a weapons squad to fire at the very thing it's defending. We find a lot of this stuff in the Codex, and apparently they're all humming and laughing and bowing whilst they do it. So they're a fantastically dark and grisly unit. And I really think the lore is fantastic for them. So today I want to finish this excerpt, this part, with a little bit from the Codex, a small storyline that they have in here. So Corporal Malins stood in a muddy trench, firing at ghosts. He and his surviving men sprayed las blasts at the blurs of light and colour rushing closer across no man's land. If they hit anything, he saw no sign of it. The enemy were almost upon them, but soon it wouldn't matter. Malin stole a glance over his shoulder. He saw Colonel Drask and the surviving commanders of the Mordian 10th 100 yards to the rear, waiting on the landing pad. Above them, descending as fast as its pilot stared, an Aquila lander came to snatch them away to safety. Malins and his men had only to stave off the Xenos until Drask was extracted, and then they could go to meet the Emperor with their heads held high. A sudden hail of enemy fire pulled his attention back to the fore. Trooper Gruffin began to scream, the sound ever more shrill and panicked. He convulsed, his flesh flushing crimson, veins standing out like ropes, and Malins had just enough time to dive clear before Gruffin exploded like a human bomb. Shaking, pasted in gore, Malins rose to see a ghoulish figure perched on a nearby ruin. It wore skeletal armour and a flowing greatcoat, and held the long-barreled cannon that had slain Gruffin. Malins raised his gun to fire, but before he could pull the trigger, the figure adjusted its aim and let fly again. The shots whispered over the trench, and Malins span in time to see them shatter the lander's canopy. Seconds later, blood sprayed the inside of the armour-glass cockpits, and the lander plunged. Colonel Drask and his retinue vanished in a roaring fireball as their extraction shuttle, the means of their salvation, instead became the instrument of their deaths. Numb, shaking, Malins looked back in time to see the skeletal figure give a mocking bow before it levelled its cannon towards him and fired again. It's good. So let's have a little look at the stats for the Death Jester and how all of this chaos and mayhem is represented on the battlefield. So a Death Jester has a movement of 8 inches, like pretty much every other Harlequin's infantry model. It has a weapon skill of 2+, ballistic skill of 2+, strength 3, toughness 3, 5 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 9, and a 6+ save. Standard character, pretty much what we've been seeing across the board. 4 attacks, actually pretty good for a sniper. He's not really meant to be in combat, but he can hold his own. And a Death Jester is a single model armed with a Shrieker cannon. Now let's have a look at the Shrieker cannon, because that is a Death Jester unique weapon, and it has a very particular profile. So the Shrieker cannon. When attacking with this weapon, choose one of the profiles below. Each time you make a wound roll of a 6+ for this weapon, that attack is resolved with an AP of -3. Now we've seen this in the shuriken weapons generally, like they all seem to have this idea that the wound of a 6+ equals AP of -3. So it has two profiles. The first profile is the Shrieker profile. So it has range of 24 inches, assault 1, strength 6, -1 AP, and damage 1. So it's just a single shot, but it is assault, which means that he can move and fire, which is quite nice, and also advance and fire just at a -1. Now, the ability is the most interesting part. Each time an infantry model is slain by an attack made with this weapon, its unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. If any models in the unit are slain by this weapon, subtract 2 from that unit's leadership characteristic until the end of the turn. There's a very interesting little niche that they have here. So you have to kill something first, but if you kill that thing, then you add another D3 mortal wounds, and then you subtract the leadership by -2. So that can mean that if you lose a model, which you have to for this ability to go off, and you've got the -2, then, you know, it's technically a -3 to the leadership if that unit has to take a morale check. It's not bad. And then we have the Shuriken profile, which is a 24-inch, assault 3, strength 6, AP 0, damage 1 weapon. So it's the same as a Shuriken cannon, which we will look at in more detail with some of the other units. But it's nice to have that versatility. Sometimes you want to have those more shots, sometimes you want to have those less shots. We'll go into why a little bit later. So the abilities they have are Rising Crescendo, like everything else, the Flip Belt, and Deadly Hunter. This model may target a character even if it is not the closest enemy unit. So they are snipers. They can hunt down characters. They have a hollow suit for a 4+ invulnerable save, and they have the Death is Not Enough ability, which is unique to the Death Jester. And it's if any models flee from a unit in the same turn that it has been attacked by this model, then you can choose the first model that flees instead of your opponent choosing. Now notice it says attacked by this model, so obviously it's great when you have the Shrieker cannon with a -2 leadership and all the rest of it to make it more likely for something to flee, but maybe you just have to attack, even if you don't hit. If something else is attacked and you've taken away a few different models, then your opponent has taken away obviously all the stuff they don't want to lose, but then, you know, if a model flees, you can say, oh, I want that special weapon gone. Or, you know, I want the sergeant gone. I want them to flee first, which is a nice little niche for the Death Jester. It's one way in which you can use him to good effect. And that's it. He's an infantry model, he's a character, and obviously he has the mask faction keyword, so whatever mask you choose, he gains the benefit from that mask. And those are the stats for the Death Jester. Now, as you can probably tell, I'm quite a fan of the Death Jester, and I do use usually at least 2 of them in any of my lists. They're not always seen as the most popular choice. A lot of people find them a little lackluster, but it depends on what you want to do with them. And this is kind of the important part of this video as well, is how to use your Death Jester effectively. Now, between those 2 profiles, like, what are you going to choose, the Shrieker or the Shuriken? This depends very much on your target. Now, the Shuriken cannon is obviously the more likely to do damage because you need to have a casualty if you're going to use that Shrieker cannon. So the Shrieker cannon is best used against things like guardsmen, low toughness, low armor models, where you can definitely kill one if you hit and manage to wound them. Now, remember, your strength is quite high with strength 6, so you're likely to wound most things on a 2 or a 3 that are going to be your targets for that Shrieker cannon. And then obviously you get the extra mortal wounds, and yeah, I found it very useful against things like guardsmen, or if you have like a few orcs left, or any of these kind of models where you're definitely likely to kill it because the save is low, and you don't really need that -1 AP, but it helps, you know, just in case they have that armor save. And just reducing that leadership, really bringing them down, can be quite useful just to finish off a squad, to get you kill more. Now, the shuriken profile is where I find it's most useful against characters. That character keyword, you don't care about the one shot, you don't want one shot, you want 3. And there are a few different combinations of things that you can use with that to make them a bit more effective. So I don't think the Death Jesters particularly benefit from any of the mask buffs. You could take them Dreaming Shadow for if they die they can shoot again, but honestly, like, you don't want them to die, so it doesn't really bother me. And with things like the Silent Shroud for the extra -1 on top, but he's a sniper, he's got a 24-inch range, you don't want him within 6 inches of your enemy anyway. So I tend to run him in a mixed Vanguard detachment, because it gives me all of the tools that I can use without me having to kind of, try and specialize him or fit him into a mask that I don't particularly want to use for any of my other units. But there are a couple of things that we can use with him. So one of the Warlord traits, for example, that you could use, because you can make him your Warlord, and I tend to, is the Luck of the Laughing God. So here he can reroll hit rolls, wound rolls, and damage rolls of 1. So that just gives him a little bit more effectiveness. You know that he's going to hit because you've got a 2+ rerolling 1s. You know he's probably going to wound because it will be 2 or 3 rerolling 1s, and then damage rolls. Maybe not the most important thing, but it can be useful as well. You could also make him a little bit more durable with something like the Fractal Storm, but then he's not really going to be going into melee. And you could, which is what I tend to do, give him the Player of Twilight. So the Player of Twilight is one of the most competitive Warlord traits that the Harlequins can take in many ways, simply because it is our only way of regaining CP, and we are quite a CP-hungry army. So what does the Player of Twilight do? Well, it allows you once per battle to reroll a hit roll, a wound roll, or a save roll. So similar to the Player of, the Luck of the Laughing God, but it's only once per battle. So, if you get unlucky and you get that roll of a 1 and you need it to become a 2, you can do that once per battle. But the most important thing is that you roll a d6 each time you or your opponent uses a stratagem. If the result exactly matches the number of command points spent to use that stratagem, then you gain that many command points. So, if you have someone using something like, a fight again stratagem, which is 3 command points, pretty much for every army, it's always 3 command points, including for us. Then what you can do is you roll a d6, and if you roll a 3, you get 3 command points. And this is not affected by tactical restraint, which is fantastic. So, we could talk about Warlord traits as a whole in another video, but I find it really useful to put on a Death Jester because you get that reroll, and because you don't want him too close to the enemy. That's important. You don't want him to die, because this only affects you, and you can only use this as long as he's still alive. So if you just hide your Death Jester, make him a Warlord, and then keep him on the battlefield for that CP regen, he can be really good for that. Another thing that I find quite useful with the Death Jester is just the ability to just stay back and take objectives, particularly late game. Now, Death Jesters do not have the biggest damage output. You're not going to kill masses with them. But what that means is that your opponents often ignore them, which is exactly what they shouldn't be doing. Obviously, skilled players are going to be looking at them and going, oh, okay, that's a threat to that objective, and they're probably going to try and target them. But because they're characters, it makes it quite difficult to target them when everything else that you have is rushing forward. Be wary of planes, who can snipe them, that sort of thing, or Vindicator assassins, that kind of horrible nonsense. But generally, it does make them a little bit more durable, and that means that you can hold backfield objectives for a very low points cost. They're very low points for what they can do. Now, the most important little tool that you can use with a Death Jester, but you have to keep him Dreaming Shadow, is Curtainfall. Now this is the only relic that I would say is worth it on a Death Jester. There's nothing else that is worth taking on one, really. Now Curtainfall is the relic that is specific to the Death Jester, and it replaces the Shrieker Cannon. So it has all the same abilities as a Shrieker Cannon. However, it has a range of 30 inches, and both of its profiles become a bit better. So the Shrieker profile is Assault 1, Strength 7, minus 3 AP and 1 damage. Now this means that D3 mortal wounds and the -1 to leadership is going to be much more likely. And you could even take it on things like, against Chaos Space Marines, for example, and other like high armor things, Havocs, those kind of units where you really need them to you need to get rid of them pretty quickly. You want them to bugger off as soon as they can go. And then you have the Shuriken profile, which is also 30-inch range, Assault 3, Strength 7, minus 2 AP and damage 1, so that's just for more shots, particularly against characters. I find that really useful, and the reason why I find it really useful is because I also use a couple of stratagems on my Death Jesters. So as I say, I keep them as Dreaming Shadow. I give one of them the relic, the Curtainfall, and I give him the Player of Twilight Warlord trait, and I hide out in the back, but sometimes move forward 30 inches just so that I can, or within 30 inches of the enemy so that I can take my little pot shots. And what I've found really, really useful is you can use him against buffing characters. I'm not talking about Chapter Masters. You're not going to floor a Chapter Master with him, but things like Company Commanders, or Weird Boys, or Pain Boys, or I'm talking about Astra Militarum and Orcs here because they're kind of the prime targets, but anything where you know that you can get a little bit of extra damage on them, or you can really actually annihilate them in one turn and take away those rerolls, or take away that feels no pain save, that's where Death Jesters excel. And there are two things that you can use with them that can make them more effective, two stratagems. One, which is my absolute favourite to use with Dreaming Shadow, is an example made. So use this stratagem in your shooting phase. Select a Dreaming Shadow character from your army, your Death Jester. Until the end of the phase, each successful hit roll made by this model causes 2 hits, and hit rolls of a 6+ made by this model cause 3 hits on the target instead. So if you're trying to target a character that has, let's say, 4 wounds, and you use an example made, and you use the Shuriken profile, then every single hit, and he's hitting on a 2+, becomes 2 hits, and a 6 becomes 3 hits. So, you're averaging out at about, 6 to 7 hits that you could cause. And remember that with that Warlord trait, you can also reroll any one, so if you get like a 1 in there, you could re-roll that one for that one time when it's really, really important. So I love that stratagem. And you could even, if you're planning on putting even more CP into your Death Jester, combine it with the Shrieking Doom. So use this stratagem before a Death Jester from your army shoots a Shrieker Cannon or Curtainfall, using the weapon's Shrieker profile. Increase the weapon's strength characteristic by 1 and its damage characteristic to D3 until the end of the phase. So if you're thinking about things like Primaris Marines, then you're not going to have very much luck with killing one with a Shrieker Cannon because they've got 2 wounds. But if you use an example made and Shrieking Doom, that can start adding up. So you're doing D3 damage, you're probably hitting twice, you've got strength 8 now, so you're wounding them on 2s. And you can just erase things using those that little combination. That costs you 2 CP to do both. So yeah, those are a couple of little combos that you can think about with your Death Jester. Don't expect too much from them. They are not there to wipe out Mortarion. They're not there to destroy whole units. What they are there for is to make those key little kills, those key kills where you need to kill a buffing character or you need to take an objective late game. That is what your Death Jester is for. And just to round it off, this is my Warlord Death Jester with Curtain Fall, and he has done me proud in the past. So yeah, I converted him from a few different parts, and I'm pretty happy with him, and sometimes he can be a bit useless, but he often does exactly what I need him to do. Take objectives, get those CP back, and occasionally kill a couple of buffing characters or wipe out the Guardsman squad. So, that was the Death Jester. Let me know what you think. Have you had success with your Death Jester? Has he completely failed you? Have you just taken them out because you don't see them as worth it? Do you think they're the bee's knees? Let me know down below in the comment section, and like and subscribe. As always, I've been Kit. Thank you very much, and goodbye.